Hello and welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 119, cryptocurrencies, what is it? So this is a question that has been nagging me for a long time, and I think it nags a lot of people that aren't familiar with cryptocurrencies, kind of look at it and you're like, what, we just have like fake internet money and apparently it gives it value and stuff like that. And so there's like a lot of questions that come along with that. And it's something I struggled with for a long time. And considering Bitcoin just had its 14th birthday recently, I uh, gave last year I decided to kind of give crypto a shot just because I was like, look, I don't really know what this is. I don't really believe in it. I think it's just kind of a huge scam and stuff like that. But scams don't usually last 13 years. Bernie Madoff did last for like 20-ish, but that's kind of a different thing. And maybe this whole thing will come collapsing down, but I think I have a value proposition for it that, in my mind, makes sense and explains what it is, why it works, what things kind of give it value, and kind of ask and answer some of those kind of intangible questions that are not intangible, but those nagging questions that people seem to have. There's some people that just kind of buy in and they're all for it, and uh, there's a lot of storylines and narratives out there about what it is, or oh, it's privacy, oh, it's freedom, and they're depending on kind of who you are and stuff like that, they're good rhetorical appeals, but I don't think it gets to the core of the question of what it is. And so to that end, this is kind of what I have come up with that makes sense to me. Cryptocurrencies at the end of the day are simply a ledger-based system that tracks transactions. The crypto is what is used as the medium of exchange and the unit of account for the ledger. Those that keep the ledger are paid in the cryptocurrency as a reward for that service. This is exactly how the current money system works. There isn't really a lot of physical dollars being exchanged back and forth. It's all done through credit card and digitally, and this is how it's kept track of, is through a ledger. Double entry bookkeeping, which was invented in the 1500s by the Italians, and some people might begrudge it, but I think it's a great system, and I also think it's one of the reasons that gold and silver and stuff aren't going to come back and really ever be mediums of exchange in the way that they have historically been seen as. That is a topic for another day that I'm not going to get into. And actually, I did do a video sometime back. It might be like episode 72. I'll link it. Um, that goes into why I don't think gold and silver are the medium of exchange that historically they have been and have seen. I don't think they're necessarily a bad idea to have around, but they're I don't want to say their days are numbered. And maybe they'll make a comeback if civilized society collapses, but it's a totally different thing. Anyway, off topic. So those that keep the ledger system are paid in the crypto as a reward for their service. So that way, it's basically they're paid for the audit and updating and keeping of the ledger. Uh, exactly how our current money system works, but since the governments and banks are the ones that are in charge of that dollar ledger system, a new medium was needed to be created as to not step on their turf. This is the base layer of what is known as the blockchain technology. This is the best explanation that I can give answering the question of what is a cryptocurrency. But there's other things that are further asked that goes deeper. So why do cryptocurrencies have any value? Effectively, it comes down to the network effect. The amount of transactions that can be recorded in a given time frame, what is called a block, is the real-world limit and value proposition for cryptocurrencies. It basically monetizes the network effect. As more people look to move from one ledger, i.e. the dollar, to a different one, that, that increases demand for that one ledger and decreases it for the other. Uh, Additionally, as the network gets crowded, the network becomes more expensive to use. The network getting saturated as far as the network getting saturated so far has coincided with an increase in price. This is because there is a symbiotic relationship between the network use and price. As the network is used more, more people become interested in the network, which increases the demand for both the space on the network and the unit of account for the network. Thus, the price of both rise simultaneously. But the cure for high prices is high prices, and eventually the main network becomes too expensive to use, and so people move back to the other ledger systems. That could be other cryptos, or it could be various fiat systems. For new people to participate in the ledger system, an existing participant has to be willing to sell a piece of their ownership of the ledger network. Thankfully, with how the network effect works, this results in a growing of the pie for everyone. So it's beneficial for everyone. So while the individual might have a smaller slice of the overall ledger system, it is offset by the added utility of having additional people to transact with within that network. As more people wish to transact on this ledger system, the more it increases in price. Additionally, as demand to transact on it increases, so does the cost per transaction. Uh, wait. Additionally, as the demand to transact on it increases, so does the cost per transaction. And this cost is in the unit of account, aka the cryptocurrency. This is to balance out demand against supply. This does create a positive reflexivity, however, where there, where one needs to acquire more of the cryptocurrency to be able to transact on the ledger, which then also increases demand for it. And so basically, as the demand for the cryptocurrency increases, so does the price in other ledger systems increase as well. This drives both the price of the crypto and the dollar up simultaneously, which is why you kind of end up getting these large spikes. And then because it hits this critical mass and level, obviously there's some mania and market euphoria that is tied in with a lot of these hockey stick level gains that happen over a short period of time. But part of it is caused by this ledger reflexivity that using up the ledger kind of causes, and then it kind of hits a ceiling and then drops off really sharply. And over time, as capacity and stuff like that gets expanded, hopefully this works its way out of the system. It's a good and bad thing, right? Because if you bought the top, it totally sucks. But it gives if it just went up and stayed up forever, it would never allow new participants to enter. So kind of a trade-off. As they say, high volatility is the price you pay for the best performing asset. I'm not. This isn't supposed to be like an investment thing, so but that's just a fun little tidbit that I've heard a lot, and it is a fun one. Continuing on, a ledger ceases to be useful if it becomes too expensive to transact on the network. Bitcoin is nearing this, I feel. Since a ledger records every 10 minutes, the point at which it hits saturation and maximum growth potential will be much earlier than one that has the capacity to facilitate transactions of a larger network. So Ethereum, I think, is every like 13 seconds for a block. Or maybe, yeah, it's got to be 13 seconds. So that's a much quicker. Phantom, I believe, is much faster. I'm not going to go through a whole list of them. But there's a lot of chains that are much, much faster than the 10 minutes that Bitcoin kind of created the standard. Now, it was the first one. It has some pack leading things in that regards, but that's the main thing it's got going for it right now, is its longevity and stuff like that. If you're a fan of Bitcoin, by no means am I trying to cause issues or anything like that, but it's just something to consider. So with this lower growth potential, it will also go up in price more initially because it's easier to kind of hit the saturation point and therefore cause that reflexivity that causes it to hockey stick. So initially the first one will go up in price more, the lower capacity one will go up in price more, but it is effectively capped by the ability of the ledger to process transactions and has a limited amount of network that it can actually capture. And so because the network is limited, the amount of people that can transact on the network is limited. It lowers its utility as a medium of exchange. Compare this to a network that can handle much larger volumes of transactions and therefore can be used more. And so this kind of goes back to why there's one of the reasons that I think Bitcoin became a store of value is because it couldn't transact payments enough to become a medium of exchange, but because there was enough people that bought into the system, it did work out as a store of value for now. Will it hold that long term? Some people think so. Maybe it will. Time will tell. 14 years is a pretty good run. Uh, so then let's get into the false scarcity. So there's this criticism of crypto that it creates false scarcity. There is false scarcity when it comes to the total units of a given crypto. So Bitcoin's 20. Oh, there's never going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And but this is a false scarcity. It doesn't really matter. Like it could be 21 million. It could be 200 billion. And as people have pointed out, with like the Satoshis and stuff like that, it can be divisible down to a very, very small fraction of a Bitcoin. So it doesn't really matter in a sense of how many actual units there are. So then what's the actual cap to the whole thing? The actual limit and driving factor of the value is the amount of transactions that can be performed on the ledger. The real world limit that is driving the value is the amount of transactions that can be performed on the ledger. Or said differently, the maximum effective network of trade and exchange that the ledger can support before it becomes oversaturated and unusable, which then moves cryptos from an abstraction built on top of an abstraction to something of real world, something tied to the real world and has real world constraints. While attempts have been, and then, so how do we get this to expand? Currently, attempts have been made to increase the amount of transactions that can be recorded by building. While attempts are being made to increase the amount of transactions that can be recorded, building up to this will take the industry some time. While that is being worked on in the short-term scaling solution has been to create additional ledgers. The way that to visualize this basically is think of urban planning, and there's multiple streets leading to a city center. Those additional streets are like additional ledgers, and the expanding capacity is like adding extra lanes to a highway. So those are the kind of two different approaches that are being taken, and there's no reason that both of them can't be done and work simultaneously. We've had more than one country forever. I kind of see cryptocurrency as a feudalism of monetary policy, or I guess, where money becomes more fractionalized and individualistic, I guess, is the best way to say it. But it'll work a lot more like what we see in like feudal Europe and stuff like that on a political level. Except this will be how monetary stuff works. So that's kind of an interesting. That's a way you can think about it, and how I personally do. So getting into this more, people point out that crypto is not ready for prime time, and I absolutely agree. But what technology in its infancy ever was? Trains are a good example. This leads to the question of what the timeline for expanding the capacity of the ledger system might look like. The expansion potential might look similar to computers, where bytes of data were once a lot and now terabytes are common. It could also look like the expansion and use of the cannon, which did not have the production facilities and high enough output to support the demands until the Napoleonic era some 500 years later. Currently, the amount of transactions that can be recorded is pitiful, but the ability for that to expand is where a lot of growth potential lies. While it will be an adoption rate similar to the internet and computers, or will technological limits leave it stuck for centuries like the cannon? Time will tell, but I lean closer to the internet more than the cannon. Then, just to kind of clarify, most of what I've been talking about when I talk about the ledger and stuff like that, that is what is often referred to as layer ones cryptocurrencies, and these are the ones. Basically they're the ledger-based system. They're your Ethereums, your Bitcoins, things like that, where you're spending that currency to transact and record transactions on the network. There's a secondary coin known as tokens, your ERC20s and things like that. The idea behind these is when they're done right, it gives the ledger additional use cases and utility that without it would make the ledger effectively useless. If the only point of the ledger is to just pass the ledger coin back and forth, all over the place. Well, what are you really doing, right? There's got to be some kind of exchange happening, and things people want to exchange one thing for the other for. And so there has to be additional things built on top of it for use cases. And so that's what we see with a lot of the things built on top of Ethereum and many other chains at this point. Because a ledger is a medium of exchange which trade is conducted on, if there is nothing to trade with, then there is no purpose for the ledger. So now to kind of cover the last little part of this whole thing, and that is the concern that cryptocurrencies are basically a trap to the promise of mad gains and things like that are a way to suck you in to try to extract your money or get you on something like a CBDC and things like that. And I think anyone who is concerned about proper risk management and stuff like that, it is a prudent thing to consider. So let's get into that. There are those concerned about committing too much to a digital existence and then not being in a position to opt out should the gate be closed behind them via something like a central bank digital currency or CBDC. This is a wise thing to consider, as one does not want to, as one wants to be anti-fragile. To this end, I have come up with my own philosophy for managing this risk. First is the really obvious one of building all your forms of capital. There are 8 different forms of capital. Those are intellectual, financial, natural, cultural, built, which is kind of like infrastructure and things like that, political, individual, and social. Curtis Stone of the Urban Farmer, now Rural Farmer, has a great video on YouTube about this. I'll leave a link in the description. That goes through all these in depth. I definitely recommend it. And as you'll notice, only one of those, financial, involves cryptocurrency at all. The key is to understand that crypto falls under just one of these forms of capital, financial. If you build out your other forms, should the worst happen and the apocalypse kicks off with a grid down situation, your skill sets and your community cultivated before the crisis will carry you through that crisis. And so it's important that people don't get overly fixated with the dollars and cents of the thing and really try to round out themselves as a person and build their other forms of capital. To add further resiliency, I've broken down my financial security into 4 camps. One is a government-backed digital medium of exchange. So currently, this would be my bank account that has everything digitally in the system and things like that. In the future, maybe this will be a CBDC, but with the other ones, I limit my downside risk of them becoming super draconian with the CBDC. And we've seen in other places where it's been tried to be implemented, like Nigeria, it has failed utterly. So we will see kind of what happens with that. I have a video on that as well. If you're interested, I don't think it's a threat that people make it out to be. Not that it isn't a threat. The second is a non-government digital medium of exchange. This is a niche crypto. This is the niche cryptocurrencies lie in. But again, both of these are very dependent on making sure that we have electricity and means to process the transactions. I have a hard time imagining that all electricity gets wiped out. But again, if that ever happens, I got bigger problems to deal with, and the things like my other forms of capital are going to carry me through that a situation that is that radical. And so for me, it's a black swan event that I don't really worry about because I've done what I can to prepare for that kind of thing. Having a garden, things like having a community, things of that nature. So that's my second one. Then the third one is a government physical medium of exchange. So this is physical cash. So in the case of something crazy happening or CBDCs being implemented and me wanting to not use that system, this gives me another vehicle to potentially do so. Well, if the government collapses, it might technically not be worth anything. It is very recognizable, and it's one of its greatest assets. So people understand what a $20 bill is worth. People understand what $100 is worth. People that's not necessarily something that translates to other mediums of exchange like cryptocurrencies, like gold and silver, and well, obviously, dollars in terms of digital works fine, but a lot of people, um, in a grid down situation, that's not an option. Um, and then the last one is a non-government physical medium of exchange. So this would be your gold and silver. Uh, well, historically, the go-to medium of exchange in uncertain times is less recognizable than cash nowadays, and so it might be less useful as an exchange tool than Gold bug would generally have you believe. Uh, since they aren't commonly traded anymore, people don't have an intuitive sense of how to value it at the current moment the way they do cash. And so, but I do think it is a good idea to have some around on the off chance that something goes wrong. Obviously, all your other stuff, seeds and all that stuff are prepared as well. This approach gives me many pillars of resilience so I can, and doesn't overly tie me into one system. So should one gate be closed, I have the ability to support myself with the other means available to me. One major factor to keep in mind is I plan to stay out of debt pretty much at all costs. Uh, there might be a situation where I have to get into debt for some reason, but I'm currently debt free and I plan on staying like that for the rest of my life if I can. um, is I plan on staying debt free uh, because if you are in debt, you must work in that ledger system that the debt was taken out of until the debt is paid back in some way. This can undermine your resilience as that was built up with your other mediums of exchange, as to get out of debt might mean that you have to compromise your stake in one of those other mediums of exchange to bail you out of the situation in another. So, you have your built capital in terms of a house, but then you have a lien on it, and all of a sudden the government does something really draconian to where you basically where interest rates are 500% compounding every minute for people who don't agree with the government, as a ridiculous example. Well, now that's going to cost you one of your forms of capital because you were stuck using their system, and there's no, like, you can't just drop their system and leave. Whereas if they decided, hey, we're going to have like a negative interest rate, or if you hold your central bank digital currency and you try to save it, there's going to be a negative interest rate on that, so that eventually it'll be all eaten up. Well, that's something that you can just be like, all right, well then I just straight up won't use it, and you just drop it, and there's nothing that holds you into that system. Whereas the debt situation can hold you in that system, and it can soak up all of your other means of exchange, and capital can get robbed from you in the other thing. And that's one of the reasons that intellectual capital is and individual capital and things like and social capital are really important, because you can't you can undermine those things yourself, but generally you can't have those stolen from you, or you can't use financial capital. Financial capital can't undermine those other things. They can, in the sense that if you use financial capital to screw over your social group, then you're going to lose your social capital, and you're going to spend that up, and that's a bad move. But yeah, your individual capital, your capacity to do things, and your intellect are two things you can always keep for yourself. There's a great line in The Count of Monte Cristo, the movie. I haven't read the book. I was supposed to at one point, where the old guy is talking to Clouseau. Is that his name? But basically, he's stuck in prison unfairly, and this old man that served in Napoleon's army is the monk is giving, or priest is teaching him all of these various things, and how to fight and all these things, and these are tangible things that really can't be taken away from you, and it's very empowering, because if you're in a situation where you're zeroed out, as it were. You should never truly be zeroed out, because financial capital is just one form of capital, and you have all these other forms of capital that can let you rebuild to the place that you were in very short order if your actual capital isn't. If you're more diversified than just financial capital. So that covers all of that. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. Hopefully that makes sense. It makes sense in my mind, so I hope it makes sense in others. Cryptocurrencies, there's a lot, and people use a lot of jargon and stuff like that. Millennials love to reinvent words for things that we already have, like blockchain and stuff like that, when it's literally just a ledger system. So hopefully using more plain English that we're all familiar with and how things work has made something that seems this obscure, odd little niche within the internet, something that's more approachable and understandable for people if they're looking to get into it. Or at the very least, you learn something. So I'm on BitChute, I'm on YouTube, I'm on everywhere you can listen to podcasts. So depending on how you prefer to consume your podcasting content, I am available. I'm also on GabTV for those who want to help grow the parallel economy out of the way to increase your social and individual capital. So, and cultural capital. So, do what you can. So anyway, that is my deal. Thank you everybody for listening, and have yourselves a good day. Goodbye.